Hey folks, thanks for joining. In this video, I'm going to go over how I set up OBS for recording my screen when I'm day trading, and how I also use encoders to reduce the file sizes of existing videos that I have so that way I can store them on hard drives or just store them on my PC before I upload them to a cloud. I really think that this is some important knowledge for people out there that record their screens. If you're a day trader or if you're some kind of an investor, you should be recording your screen when you're working, when you're placing orders, when you're working with your trading software. This could be for the purpose of sending videos to your customers, sending videos to the mentors that you're working with. Maybe you have to send videos directly to the software platforms that you're using to fix a bug, or maybe you have to prove to your broker that they had a serious problem and you need to show them what happened. I've recorded more than 500 videos easily just using this software, and most of them are on this channel, to be honest with you. I'm also going to show you how to use software like Handbrake or FFmpeg to re-encode existing videos on your hard drive to save space. I'm going to show you how to use hardware encoding, which means we're going to use the graphics processing unit in your system, the GPU, to re-encode these videos. And this can all be done by an average user of this program. What you need, of course, is you need to have OBS installed. OBS is a software used mainly for recording and streaming your desktop screen, but it can also be used as a multi-purpose recording software too. OBS is a very good software because it's supported on multiple operating systems. I used to use it on Microsoft Windows. You just go to their website, obsproject.com, and you download it there. If you're on Linux, I recommend installing OBS through a Flatpak, whereas if you're on Windows or Mac, I believe that OBS provides the installers directly on their website for that. So once you have OBS installed and running, it's going to look something like this. As you can see, I'm currently using it to record my screen here, and I'm actually using the integrated graphics card on this ThinkPad T14 laptop to record this video. So if I go ahead into my terminal and I just show you the graphics card working, you can see this is the integrated graphics, and you can see that the encoder is working, although it's not being strained too much, but it's using about 18% of the graphics card, and it's using almost all the memory. Now if I look at my CPU, you can see that in general, my CPU is not under a considerable load right now because I'm just running a few other applications in the background. I think that when it comes to recording video using OBS, it's best to use GPU encoding because it removes the strain off of your CPU, so that way your CPU can be used for other applications like your trading applications, for example. There's a high probability that your computer has some sort of a graphics processing unit. It's either going to have a dedicated GPU, like a separate NVIDIA card, or it's going to have onboard dedicated graphics. Now, in both of those scenarios, you can set up OBS to use the graphics processing unit instead of the CPU. So if you need to install OBS, you just search for install OBS, and I'm going to install it here on my Windows 11 virtual machine. So I'll select Windows right here, then I'll scroll down. I'll download the installer. Once that's complete, you open the installer, click yes, install to the default location, then it starts extracting the files. So this is what OBS will look like when you open it for the first time. I'm going to show you how to add a simple display capture. So under scenes, you can leave the default scene there. Now go under sources, click the plus icon, and then find display capture. And then just click OK. You don't have to change the name unless you want to. And then it will automatically pick up your display depending on which operating system you're on. On Windows or Mac or even Linux, this works pretty much right out of the box. You don't normally have to configure anything here. So if you see something like this where your display is incorrectly set, like it only shows a portion of your display, what you do is you right click anywhere in the scene box, and then you do resize output source size, and then it's going to say the base and output resolutions will be resized. Just select yes, and now it'll be resized. You may have to do that if you change your display resolution. So if you go into your display settings of your operating system and then you start changing the resolution around, you're going to have to also change your resolution in OBS to match that new screen resolution. You're going to have to tell it which screen resolution to use. So when it comes to recording simple videos and footage of your trading on your screen, I recommend just recording the native resolution of your display. If you have a higher resolution display, then it might be worth considering scaling that recording to a lower resolution so that it takes up less file size. So now that you have your display set up, let's talk about the encoding settings. So I'll go to settings. and then I'll go to output. Now, under output mode, I typically change this from simple to advanced. The reason is because the simple menu kind of gives you limited options. I prefer to have a little bit more control over my encoders because you can tell it to use the GPU or some newer encoders that are out there like AV1. Okay, so I'm gonna set up OBS for recording my screen. I clicked on the recording tab here. Now under the type, you can leave it on standard. You don't have to do custom output. So you set your recording path, which is typically the videos directory. That's fine. Now, when it comes to the recording format, you absolutely want to leave this on MKV. The reason is because OBS is configured with their MKV containers so that if OBS crashes or if your machine crashes or freezes, the video files remain intact. And I can confirm this because I had multiple crashes on my Asus laptop a few days ago. Because the motherboard is broken, and that's their fault because they replaced that motherboard. And after I restarted the machine, the videos that were recording were still intact. I was able to go ahead and remux this to an MP4 container, and the video was completely playable and non-corrupted. It was good. So always use MKV, and then you're going to be able to use a feature in OBS to convert this to an MP4 afterwards if you need to edit it or re-encode it. So leave it on MKV. Now, when it comes to the video encoder, this is where you're going to have multiple options. Now, because this is a Windows 11 virtual machine, there's no graphics card being passed in to the virtual machine, so it only sees the CPU options. If you have a NVIDIA GPU, you should see options like NVENC HEVC or NVENC H264 or NVENC AV1. If you have onboard graphics and OBS is picking up your onboard graphics card, you should also see the VA API encoder, which basically means you're using onboard dedicated graphics. And I recommend that. So if we look at the settings of the OBS that I'm currently using to record my screen, you'll see here under the output tab, recording, you'll see that I'm currently set to use video encoder FFmpeg VA API AV1. So if you have onboard dedicated graphics on like a ThinkPad, you're probably going to be using something like this. I've experimented with 3 encoders for hardware. First one is Legacy H264. The second one is H265 or HEVC. It's the same thing, which is a highly compressed format, which means you're going to be able to get lower file sizes for the same quality that you would get with other encoders. And AV1 is a newer encoder, which is similar to HEVC. And this actually is supposed to give you even higher quality at the same bit rate as HEVC. So basically these are my settings right here. You can see under the audio encoder, I'm using the default encoder. And scrolling down a little bit, it picks up my VA API device. And these settings are important if you're using hardware encoding. So if you're using the encoder like I have, where the AV1, profile main, level, auto, rate control, you can either use CQP or CBR. I prefer CBR because you can actually control the target bit rate of the video in a more precise way. I've used CQP a lot. Actually, CQP is very good because it automatically adjusts the bit rate depending on how much action is taking place on the screen. But if you're doing tests where you want to target a specific bit rate, then I prefer to use CBR. So say I have this set to CBR. I'm currently recording my screen at a bit rate of 600 kilobits per second, which is quite small. It's quite low in terms of bit rate. Just to give you guys a reference, my camera is currently recording this shot here at a bit rate of 100 megabits per second. So I'm only recording my screen at 600 kilobytes per second, which is not even 1 megabit per second. So obviously the file sizes that come out of this camera on full quality are extremely large. Now I'm going to show you the feature in OBS for how to move the MKV recordings to MP4s so that way you can edit them and re-encode them if you need to. So I'll go to File, Remux Recordings, and then I'll click on the 3 dots here in the middle. And now I'm in my directory of videos. And what you would basically do is select one of your MKV videos. After you know which recording it is, you select the video here and then you open it. Now before I do that, I just want to actually show you that the video that I'm currently recording here is this one. You can see that the file size is slowly increasing because that's the video that's currently being encoded as I'm recording this video for you right now. And you can see that it's currently 114 megabytes and I've been recording for about 24 minutes. So that's just to give you an idea of the kind of file size that I'm achieving with the target bitrate that I set for that AV1 encoder. For every 24 minutes, it's about 115 megabytes, and I would say that's pretty good as compared to other encoders I've seen. So to remux a video, you select one of your MKV videos you recorded using OBS, open it here, and then it's going to show you the target file, and you can change the name of it if you want. You can say, for example, remuxed with the same extension that it had in the same directory, and then I'll click remux, and now it should be there. And I'll click clear finished items and then close the window. And if I go back to that remux recordings thing, you'll see that that's the video I just remuxed. And sometimes when you remux them, it'll be a couple of megabytes larger than the original MKV file. That's normal. Now I want to talk a little bit about the differences between streaming and recording locally. These are some ideas that I have. Now, I'm a little bit biased because I've always been one to record my sessions locally to my machine. I never really did a lot of streaming. I think streaming is a viable solution. I've talked with plenty of traders that stream their trading sessions directly to cloud services like YouTube and others. But I think that in terms of efficiency, I think that recording directly to your machine is more efficient in the sense that all you need to do is press record and then stop recording, and it doesn't rely on an internet connection at all. So if you have a shaky internet connection, streaming is probably not going to be a good option for you. If you're already set up and good with your streaming and you find it's reliable for you, one reason why that might be a better option than recording locally is because the files are no longer saved on your hard drive. It's more efficient in terms of hard drive space because you don't have to worry about re-encoding videos, compressing them to smaller file sizes, and that's what I'm going to show you how to do next for more of the tech savvy ones. So I do think that if you have some sort of a network outage, streaming is going to introduce more problems because you have to make sure the stream is stopped and then you start the new stream on the cloud service. And if you're doing things like trading and you're managing trades at the same time, in my opinion, that could be problematic because you're focused more on the trading, not so much on the recording of your screen. Whereas if you're recording locally, all you have to do is press record, and then it's always going to be recording. So you can focus more on your trading and less on anything else. Now, if you do plan to do streaming, typically the easiest way is to just set up a free YouTube account and stream directly to it. I think you need to do verification of your Google account in order to upload longer videos and stream videos to YouTube, so keep that in mind. Maybe before watching this video, you recorded your screen and you have some larger file sizes that are taking up a lot of space on your hard drive because you didn't know how to use GPU encoding and you didn't know how to set them up properly for lower file sizes. So I'm going to show you how to re-encode your existing videos so that way you can retain good quality and reduce the file size considerably. And the reason why this is possible is because encoding technologies come a very long way, and we have encoders now that can pretty much encode the video to a low file size and retain high quality. So let's talk about that now. Now, if you're on Windows or Mac or Linux, there's a software that I recommend checking out called Handbrake. Now, I don't personally use it on this install because it doesn't pick up my dedicated graphics card. However, if you have a NVIDIA graphics card on your system, Handbrake typically picks those up very well. So you shouldn't have a problem if you use a NVIDIA card. Now, what I'm going to do is show you this one video file that I have here. I'm just going to open it up in VLC Media Player to prove that it's a legitimate video of me trading. Now I'll close it, and now I'll right click on it and I'll do open with Handbrake, which is a video encoder software that I already have installed. Normally, if you install Handbrake on Windows, you'll also get this menu where you can open a video file with Handbrake. Handbrake is a video encoding software that has a graphical user interface like this that allows you to tell it exactly how you want to re-encode the video and which encoders to use. So you start by doing that. You start by opening the video in Handbrake. The next thing that I typically do is I select the directory of where I want to encode it to. So I'll click over here at the bottom, and then I'll go to the directory that I'm in, which is encoding tests, and then I'll press select at the bottom. And then I'll also rename the file to encoded underscore, so I know that this is the encoding one. Then if you need to change the dimensions, you would do it in the dimensions tab, but typically what I do here is just make sure that the dimensions are the same. Now in the dimensions tab at the top, you're gonna see the dimensions of your source video. Now, this video was actually recorded on my other laptop, which has a higher resolution display. You can see here it was recorded at a resolution of 3200 by 2000. So when you have videos recorded in a certain resolution, you have two choices. You can either encode it in a lower resolution to save file space, or you can keep the same resolution. Now, normally, if you're recording everything from the same machine and then re-encoding from the same machine, you're not gonna have this type of problem. This type of problem is only gonna be presented to you if you recorded using a different resolution and now you have to re-encode into another resolution, a lower resolution, for example. In order to change the display size, you need to click on resolution limit and then set it to custom, because if you set this to 1080p full HD, it's going to limit your resolution. So in this case, I'll just put it as custom. And now I make sure the maximum size is set to the same resolution as the video I wanted. Although if you wanted to downscale it, you could do that here. You could change the maximum size. Okay, so once you set up your dimensions and resolution of the video, you go to the video tab, and this is where you set your video encoder. Now in this case, Handbrake doesn't pick up my hardware encoder, so I only have CPU encoders here, which is obviously not ideal. You want to do this on hardware because it's going to encode a lot faster. The encoders that you should get familiar with using are typically H.264, X.264, which is the standard legacy encoder that's been working for a very long time. If you have an older NVIDIA card, you should see over here NVENC H.264. That's going to be the only one you have if you have an older NVIDIA card. If you have a newer NVIDIA card, you could probably encode in H.265 NVENC, which is what I recommend, or an AV1 NVENC as well, which is the newest, latest, greatest one. So let's say this video was like a gigabyte large. I was going to re-encode it using Handbrake. What I would typically choose here for a faster encode is I would choose a hardware encoder, because those are going to be a lot faster compared to the CPU encoders like these. Though if speed is not an issue for you, you can go ahead and use a CPU encoder. And if you have to encode multiple videos, you might choose to encode a video on the GPU and encode another video on the CPU at the same time, so that way you can use all your resources. That's an option. So, you know, for the purpose of this example, I'm gonna do a H.265 encode because I typically use H.265 a lot, and I've only been experimenting with AV1 very lately. H.265 is a very good codec to use because you can achieve very small file sizes and retain a lot of the quality of the video. So it's considered to be a higher quality format of video. And AV1 is considered to be even higher than H.265 by a little bit. So I'll do H.265 and I'm gonna do a CPU encode. Now, you can choose the frame rate of the video if you want. For example, if you have a scenario where you encoded the video by accident in 60 frames and now you want to just re-encode it in 30 frames or even in 24 frames, you can re-encode it using a lower frame rate, and that's going to save you space as well. The most important item I would say is the constant quality setting. So if you have this set to a hardware encoder, you'll see a different number here. It should say QP rather than RF. Now when it comes to the constant quality figure, this slider, if you set it to 0, it basically means a lossless video. Now, you're never really going to need that because your eye pretty much can't determine the difference between lossless quality and lossy quality. So even if you encoded two videos, one lossless and one at say 24, it's very rare that you're going to be able to even see a difference with that by eye. You'll see a difference in the bit rate, but you won't see a difference with your eyes. I find the sweet spot for good quality and compression to be around 34. Between 30 and 34 for H.265. So I'm going to do it in code with H.265, 30 frames per second. I'll set the RF figure to 34. The preset, you don't have to worry about this so much, but if you set it to fast, it will encode the video faster. Whereas if you set it to slow, it's going to take a longer time to encode each frame of the video. So you can set this to fast if you want it to go a little bit faster. Once you're ready with that, you can pretty much press OK. All this other stuff is bonus. You don't have to worry about it too much. So once you're ready, you just press start. And now we can see the progress of the encode here at the bottom. And because this is a CPU-based encode, it's going to take a lot longer than a GPU encode. If you have a fast GPU, this could take, you know, a few seconds sometimes. While we're waiting for that, I'm going to close this window and then go and look at the CPU, and you can see that I'm really taxing my CPU now with this encode. So that's what we're watching. We're currently watching GHB, which is Handbrake, re-encode this MOV file into another format. So let's wait for this to finish. Now, for some of you more technical guys out there, if you want more control over exactly how you want to encode your video, or if Handbrake is not supported on your system, typically you have to just end up using FFmpeg. And FFmpeg is actually the back-end software that is used by OBS and Handbrake to do the video encoding. On most Linux installs, FFmpeg is already installed by default. So you just do FFmpeg -- version, and you'll see what version you have. Maybe I mistyped the version command, but you can still see here that I have this version right here, which is a relatively new version of FFmpeg. It gets shipped on Fedora. So I'm going to go over to the script that I created, and I'm going to show you that I have a script that is able to call an FFmpeg command based on a few command line inputs that I put in, and it could encode a video using multiple encoders that I set. So I can choose to encode in HEVC, and that's what this command looks like right here. So it'll do a command like that with all those input arguments. And I can also do it in H.264 or AV1 or VP9 using CPU encoding. So what I'm going to do is go over to my videos directory in the encoding tests, and then I'm going to run my encode command because I have it set so that this command can run globally in any directory I'm on my machine. And I'm going to encode this video, which is the 2024 MOV file. I'm going to add a prefix to it, or a suffix, I guess. I'm going to say FFmpeg encoded, and then I'm going to give it a constant quality figure, so let's say 34. And then I'm going to tell it the encoder to use, which is HEVC, and then I'll press enter, and now it's currently encoding the video, the MOV video, using my hardware encoder, and I'm going to prove to you that it's doing that now by going to my other terminal. So let's say I run nvtop d01. You can see there's my video encoder working a little bit harder, and it's actually now sharing my integrated graphics between FFmpeg and OBS, which is what I'm using to record this video now, using the integrated graphics. Now I want to show you just some examples of how much you can compress a video file using the methods that I'm showing you here. So for example, this is the full video file of a video that I uploaded last week going over a trading loss that I had, meta loss review. And then I did some tests re-encoding and exporting the video for different platforms because, for example, X doesn't accept 4K video. They also only accept H.264 codec. So you can see I turned a 24 gigabyte video into 993 megabytes. So for this particular export, I was not aiming to get the smallest file size, but I was simply aiming to get a 1080p export in H.264 codec so I could export it to the X platform. If I look at the final video, which was exported in Adobe Premiere Pro, the bitrate for that video is 106 megabytes per second, or megabits per second. And if I look at my 1080p version exported for X, you can see this one's only 4 megabits per second. Here's an example of me encoding this video file, which was originally 569 megabytes. And I'm gonna look at the bitrate of the original video. You can see the bitrate was about 1.1 megabits per second at 30 frames per second. And I re-encoded this video 2 times, once using the AV1 encoder and then using the H.265 encoder. You can see that the AV1 has a slightly smaller file size, but what I'm going to do is compare the bit rates for you. So the bit rate of the AV1 video is down at 448 kilobits per second, and the bit rate of the HEVC is a little bit higher at 470 kilobits per second. And you can see that the file sizes are nearly the same, but if you do your research on AV1 codec, they say that it has higher quality at the same bit rate as H.265. So if you care about quality at lower bit rates, it's best to go with the AV1 codec if you can, and if the software used to play the videos supports it, because for example over here with VLC I can't actually play AV1 videos, but I can play them using the default media player here in my operating system, which is interesting. So sometimes certain softwares might run into issues with AV1 codec because it's still a new codec. Okay, so my CPU encode in Handbrake is currently done, and let's go examine the files that it created. So this is the video that I just encoded right here in Handbrake. I should have written Handbrake encoded, but you can see just by comparing file size to the original video, I took 132 megabyte file down to about 45 megabytes. And that's certainly not the best we can do, because this video was already encoded in HEVC format. So what I'll do is look at the bit rates. So the bit rate of the original file was almost 2 megabits per second. And then if I go to the new file, I'm right around 659 kilobits per second, which in my opinion is pretty much a sweet spot if you're doing screen recording in 1080p or higher. You can pretty much get away with, I would say, as low as about 500 to 600 kilobits per second is the sweet spot where you don't really see much quality degradation in the screen recording. So even if I just compare them, if I open this with VLC, you're going to see that it looks higher quality in general because this was recorded using a high resolution display. You can see everything looks very clear and sharp. But if I go to the new video, it's 45 megabytes. You can see that it might be slightly more grainy, but overall everything is still readable on the screen, which means that for the most part, you're not going to run into issues re-encoding your videos with lower bit rates as long as you're using the encoders I told you about here, like HEVC and AV1. Thank you guys for watching. I appreciate it. And let me know if you guys have any questions, comments. I'd be happy to answer them. Check out this playlist right here, full of interactive brokers tutorials. And check out this playlist, which goes over some of the tech that I use here on this channel. Thank you.